I'm not sure how normal this is, but I've noticed Birmingham is a town with a lot of almost got it stories. As part of Ask Alabama, we've tackled a few in the past. Did Birmingham nearly get the big airport that ended up in Atlanta? Probably not. Was Birmingham almost the headquarters of Jack Daniels? It actually was for a few years. Questions like these can be tricky because people don't really keep records of things that didn't almost happen. But I've gotten pretty good at them, so let's see if we can't slap down another Birmingham legend. Was Birmingham almost the headquarters for the CDC due to the cholera outbreak? That question was submitted by Alex Cody. The cholera outbreak he's referring to is this nasty plague that hit Birmingham in 1873, just 2 years after the city was founded. It killed 100 people, caused half the population to flee the city, and came close to wiping Birmingham off the map. The city was only saved by a few brave souls who stayed to help the sick, including the town's prostitutes who basically became volunteer nurses. We may cover that story more extensively one day because it's weird, but it had nothing to do with the Center for Disease Control. The cholera outbreak happened in 1873, and the CDC was born out of work done during World War II, which was nearly 70 years later. So let's get into that. In 1940, World War II was popping off, but the US hadn't joined the fight yet. But the writing was on the wall, and American leadership made efforts to improve military readiness should US troops need to join the fray. And they were dealing with a problem. Mosquito populations around military bases in the southeast and other island territories were causing outbreaks of malaria. This wasn't good because soldiers with malaria aren't good at soldiering. So the Department of War reached out to the Public Health Service to see what could be done. In 1941, the Public Health Service sent their top malaria expert down to Fort McPherson in Atlanta, Georgia. Shortly after the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1942, when the US was now in the war for realsies, it became clear that one guy wasn't going to be enough. So the Public Health Service got funds to set up an entire department to fight the malaria issue. And so the Office of Malaria Control in War Areas, also called the MCWA, was set up at Fort McPherson. The office was made up not just of medical doctors, but also engineers and entomologists, or bug experts. The doctors could help treat those already infected, but to really make a difference, they were going to need to deal with the cause of the outbreaks, the mosquitoes. But efforts started slow. In the first year of the office, the only transportation options available to employees were bicycles. But as the war continued, the MCWA got better equipment and started coming up with more effective ways to take out the mosquito populations. They poisoned mosquito beds and drained swamps of standing water, and by the end of the war in 1945, they had managed to nearly eradicate the malaria virus in the United States. They were so good that their responsibilities were expanded to deal with dengue, yellow fever, typhus, and whatever other weird tropical diseases soldiers brought back from the war. But by 1946, it was becoming pretty clear that the end of the war was going to mean the end of the office. So the leaders of the Office of Malaria Control in War Areas submitted a proposal to keep their work battling diseases on the ground going under a new department called the Communicable Disease Center. It was approved, and the Communicable Disease Center set up shop in Atlanta in 1946. It later became the Center for Disease Control. Now let's look at whether Birmingham was ever considered for the headquarters. The CDC was set up in Atlanta because that's where the Office of Malaria Control in War Areas already was, so Birmingham wouldn't have been considered. It also helped Atlanta that Emory University offered up land for the center to operate. And the Office of Malaria Control in War Areas was set up in Atlanta because that's where their chief malaria expert was already doing his research. So again, no reason for Birmingham to be considered. But the biggest nail in the coffin of this myth is that the Office of Malaria Control in War Areas was working on a military operation. And Fort McPherson in Atlanta was an established military base with permanent medical facilities. The only base in Birmingham during World War II would have been a temporary Army Air Force base they set up at the Birmingham airport only for the duration of the war. It wasn't really equipped for the scientific and medical research needed to eradicate a disease, and as the federal government planned to give the airport back after the war, it didn't really make sense for the military to pay to install those facilities. I reached out to representatives at the CDC who went and researched it themselves, and they couldn't find any reference to Birmingham ever being considered along the way. They guessed that maybe a satellite MCWA worksite may have been set up in Birmingham at some point, but according to the MCWA's own reports at the time, most of their Alabama work was done near the coast, so that doesn't really make sense. Now, obviously, you can't prove a negative, but according to every avenue I've checked, the answer to this question is a flat no. The CDC was never almost going to be in Birmingham. And the cholera outbreak had absolutely nothing to do with the formation of the CDC. And boom, another Birmingham myth destroyed. Thanks, Alex. I'm high-fiving myself so hard right now. I'm Jonathan Soboleski for Reckon. If you like this video and like what we're doing on Reckon, you can help us out by following Reckon by AL.com on Facebook and at Reckon Alabama on Twitter. And if you've got questions about Alabama you want answered, you can submit those questions to AL.com/ask. Thanks for watching.